Alcohol and its culture in ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome. Throughout history, the consumption of alcohol has always been a big topic of conversation and ultimately a part of human culture, influencing how people lived, worked, and celebrated. From ancient times to prohibition and its return to normalcy today, in this documentary, we'll take a trip back in time to see how alcohol affected three ancient civilizations: Egypt, Greece, and Rome. By looking at old writings, artifacts, and what experts say, we'll learn more about the important role alcohol played in these ancient cultures. Our journey begins in ancient Egypt, where beer was not just a drink, but also a vital part of everyday life. Egyptians believed that beer was among the many gifts of the gods granted to humanity in the early days of the world, with Osiris, a major deity, teaching them how to brew it. Beer was such an idolized substance that there's even proof that it was regularly used as compensation for labor. Yep, that's right, people were paid in beer. Festivals celebrating beer were common, highlighting its cultural significance. Evidence of beer's significance can be found in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, where scenes of brewing and drinking beer adorn temple walls and tombs. These carvings depict the process of beer production from harvesting to brewing. The attention to detail in these inscriptions further highlights the level of which beer was regarded in ancient Egyptian society. The hymn to Ninkasi, an old Sumerian poem found from 1800 BCE, also shows how important beer was in ancient times. This hymn praises Ninsaki, the goddess of beer, and describes how beer was made in a poetic way. It emphasizes how important beer making was, even though it's from Sumeria. The hymn's ideas about beer are similar to those in ancient Egypt, showing how important alcohol was back then. Transitioning to ancient Greece, we also transition into the significant influence of wine on society. Central to Greek social life were gatherings called symposia. The symposium was for the elite in society, typically only powerful upper-class men, and the parties were invite only. The symposium, famous in books like the Herodotus, the Histories, where people talked about important ideas and argued about philosophy. They relaxed on couches and drank wine from special cups called kylixes, with fancy designs. Even though the symposium was known for its elite exclusivity and intellectual conversations, it had some issues. One of them was pedestry. Young boys would serve the men at the parties, and the women would provide musical entertainment. It wasn't uncommon for these guests to be groped by men when they were drunk. Despite these problems, wine was still seen as fancy and important in ancient Greece. It was a part of everything from religious ceremonies to parties. Our journey concludes in ancient Rome, where wine also reigned supreme as the drink of choice. Romans adored their wine, enjoying it at all kinds of gatherings. To them, it wasn't just a drink, but a symbol of Roman culture and luxury. Wine was everywhere in Roman life, even during wartime. References in Julius Caesar's writings indirectly tell us that soldiers also drank wine for comfort and companionship. But it was at fancy dinners and feasts like those depicted in the Worn Cup. This cup, decorated with scenes of wild parties, and usually included two men engaging in sexual acts, similarly to what went on at Greek symposiums. This silver cup shows us how much the Romans would spend on drinking culture and wine vessels. Behind the scenes, slaves worked hard in vineyards to keep up with the demand for wine, because in ancient Rome, estates, slaves, and vineyards were key. It was such a huge part of the culture in ancient Rome that as the empire became wealthy, all classes of people drank, even including peasants and slaves. When we think about ancient Rome, we see how wine was everywhere. Whether soldiers were fighting or people were at a fancy party, wine played a big part. It influenced the culture and traditions of one of the greatest civilizations in history. Even slaves got to drink wine sometimes. Looking back at ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome, we see how alcohol was more than just something to drink. It was a part of everyday life, shaping how people socialized, celebrated, and even worked. Whether it was beer in Egypt, wine in Greece, or wine again in Rome, alcohol played a big role in these civilizations. By studying their use of alcohol, we gain a deeper understanding of their cultures and customs, showing us how important the mind-altering substance was in shaping the past.